Hey everybody, we'd like to welcome you guys to the first version of Travel with a Purpose podcast. And today we'll be getting to know one of our hosts, along with myself, who is Glenn Galindo. And we'll be getting to know about his Minga House Foundation today. How's it going, Glenn?
How you doing, Walter?
Great. Yeah. Today I kind of really wanted our audience to get to know you, but obviously Minga House Foundation. And so kind of what can you tell us about Minga House Foundation and kind of how it got started?
In 2013, I had the opportunity to do a friend a favor. I was living in the Spokane, Washington area. I was running a different nonprofit, and he was involved in medical missions. Him and his father had been running their organization for 20 something years. Taking students all over the world, medical students, nursing students, physical therapy students, to do practicums and volunteer missions, medical missions for a week or two. And they were also in Spokane, Washington. And so we became acquainted in the nonprofit that I was running, supporting first generation students, migrant education students, alumni, and we were a scholarship with them, giving them scholarships to go to college and helping them, coaching them, especially through their freshman year. And I thought it was a good idea for health pre-professionals to go and have an experience that would give them firsthand patient care in a different country, learning medical systems. So my buddy thought that was a great idea. Sure, let's do it. He was already going to 12 countries, and I suggested that he add Colombia. Why? Because 7 years earlier, I had come twice in 1 year. And I had had a great time in Colombia, like most do, and immediately came back. I came back for spring break, then I came back for summer. I was in graduate school at Washington State University, and so I suggested to my friend in 2013, "Hey, you should add Colombia." So we were both military officers. I was in the Marine Corps. He was an Air Force pilot. So he said, "Sure, why don't you go ahead and set it up?" And I had the recollection of how much great time I had. And so I said, okay, where would I do these medical missions? He was already in countries that had great beach experiences, Panama and Jamaica and Dominican Republic, and great safari sites in Africa. And he had iconic South America places like Machu Picchu in Peru. And of course, the peace and tranquility of Costa Rica. And from the plane, I was brainstorming this, and three ideas came to mind. When you think of Colombia, you think of the 1980s, and those of us who grew up in the 1980s, there's a whole series of movies that made Colombia famous, that still very much created a legacy for Colombia of risk, all the narco and gangster, but that was not going to be a good angle to promote Colombia. In 2013, Shakira was getting popular, and I thought, well, but how do I use that? It's not like she was going to be at the airport to greet the medical teams every time they came.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't it. Now, I was living, like I said, in the Northwest, and coffee, Starbucks was certainly iconic up there. I said, well, there's possibly the option. None of those other countries are known as coffee countries. I'll go with coffee. So, long story short, that's what I decided. I landed in Bogota, got myself a guide. I told the person, take me to the coffee region. I want to meet Juan Valdez. I thought Juan Valdez was a dude, a ranch guy. He had a big finca with lots of coffee. When I went to the foundation of the National Federation of Coffee Growers, at the presentation, I realized Juan Valdez is just a cartoon. He is the image of the National Co-op, and that's how they market Colombian coffee. Well, by then, okay, so I wasn't going to meet the guy, but by then I'd already been running around in Jeeps and enjoying the landscape, the small villages. And by then I was pretty sure that that was the way to go. So then I found a non-touristy all coffee town, which turned out to be Chinchina Caldas, between Pereira and Manizales, where I reside still to this date. And we started running medical teams. So by 2014, we had our first medical team. We set up all transportation, all the logistics, who was going to cook with the doctors we were going to hire, the medicines we were going to buy, the villages we were going to partner with, all of the lodging. We incorporated as a nonprofit. And by then I decided that I was enjoying the setting so much. And I planned this whole thing that I just had to do the first one. So I told my buddy, hey, it's all set up. This is around March. I've been here 3 months. But I said, I'm going to run the first team. He said, great, go for it. And it turns out our foundation scholarship, 12 students. So we paid and we selected 12 students, all pre-meds and nursing students from throughout the country, mostly West Coast. And I ran the first medical mission. I brought in a doctor from Belize to show me the ropes. I had a great time. Again, just fell in love with being in the coffee region, fell in love with riding Jeeps, and the landscape just really is, it's quite impactful. It just doesn't look like anything that you've seen in the States. And I often say different is attractive, different is beautiful. And so certainly it was different. But then once I experienced the medical missions, I really had a great time. It was a great gentleman from Belize that did a great job setting it up, running the clinic so we could watch and observe and learn. By then, my oldest daughter was entering high school. And she told me that she'd like to be a doctor. And that's all the excuse I needed. I had had a great time setting this up. And now when my youngest daughter, who's a very successful young lady, was very successful high school student, very busy. And I knew that as a dad, I would have to be somehow creative to remain relevant in her life because they get really busy with all their activities and successes. So I said, hey, honey, you want to get a doctor? Awesome. I'm going to set this up. And during the break, you'll be coming down to Colombia and join me. And it's going to be great for your studies and great for your career. So that was it. When she said that, it gave me the green light. And I probably in 2014, 15, and 16, I brought about, I think, 25, 26 medical teams. And again, really, 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 really enjoyed the experience. We selected an area of the country where there were no tourists. And most of the villages just had never had a group of foreigners or tourists come to them. So it was really the ET moment. It was beautiful. It was beautiful for the students, beautiful for the communities, established the contacts with everybody and anybody that's in the community. That was very enjoyable and very hopeful of what could be done, the impact we could have. I fell in love with watching a young university student. I'd already worked in universities for 20-something years in programs of education and first-generation students. So it's always fun to see that aha moment when a young person gets conviction or puts into perspective their former expectations and reality, and it's a privilege to be there to sort of catch or coach them through what sometimes can be actually a difficult experience. It could be a new experience where they might be abroad for the first time, where they may not see needs beyond wants. So like maybe my children who are lucky and privileged to have educated parents, that they don't have to worry about the basics of life, that they already know they're going to go to university. So, and all of a sudden to put into an environment where they see kids that deal with day-to-day challenges of nutrition or well-being just overall, or just dealing with challenges in life that maybe they haven't seen. And it's really is an honor and a privilege to be there and kind of help them get through that perspective, that experience, and come out not feeling confused, but rather just simply understanding that life's not fair and that the thing that they should mostly worry about is who they are becoming as a person and hopefully as a professional. And it was a great experience. So I kept doing it. Told my buddy, hey, I'm just going to keep running this thing. And he said, oh, great, go for it. And once my daughter said that she wanted to be a doctor, then I began retaining my then employees, my assistants, set up shop. We began supporting, well, first 2 years, it was coming and going and staying in hotels. But now we opened up a facility, invested into our staff to become more permanent, more experts in their roles, and began offering volunteering opportunities to individuals, not just the university teams. We began adopting nonprofits in town. The idea developed. It wasn't part of a master business plan. It just sort of evolved. But I didn't want to come and it's a small community. I didn't want to come overimpose and be the savior, the whole savior complex sometimes international organizations or volunteers have. The idea was I was going to find good people doing good things already. That was my curiosity. Who's doing what? Who's already trying to do something great, or maybe is doing something good in the community, and then we can support them. So it evolved to, our mission was to hopefully provide resources, money. They all need money. Second was to provide hands, volunteers, sometimes experts in their field, sometimes just people who were curious about whatever they did, and they had the willingness to help. And capacity building. Maybe it was to help them build a website or offer accounting services or legal services or marketing campaign, fundraising, development of their staff, help them find staff. And with that model of simply identifying and supporting existing good people, and I have to say good people in not organizations, because some of them were just, they'd say, oh, we're just a nonprofit, but it was just a husband and a wife taking care of running a daycare for sex workers, for up to 60 children of sex workers. Or it was a nurse, a hospice nurse that has been taking in homeless elderly into his apartment, like 12 of them. Or maybe it was, or in the other end, a federally funded nonprofit that houses over 100 teenage girls whose wards of the court, where they're there because they were neglected, or the parents went to jail, or their parents were in rehab, or they were sexually abused, or they lived with grandma and she died, and they were in some limbo state of being adopted, or the court allowing another family member to take over. With animal care, dog shelter. We just started finding good people doing good things, and we supported them. And that's work. And now it's been 13 years later. So that's the core of what we've evolved to do. Along the way, we've had to be creative. First, I was just a guy having a good time using my savings. Came down, didn't think I'd stay, but it was fun. And I was just using my savings. Pandemic came, sold my house in the States, and that's how I kept it going. But eventually, I had to think creatively how we were going to generate funds, because the teams or the individuals wasn't enough. And when the pandemic came, it all stopped, but I still had staff. So we had to come up with other ways. So along the way, I got asked by the Secretary of Education in Colombia to help with Colombia Bilingüe in 2017. That was a cool experience, where they called me one Wednesday evening, an HR lady of a university that had the contract to run Colombia Bilingüe in 67 municipalities, 267 public schools.
Hey there, and thanks for listening to the Travel with a Purpose podcast, hosted by Glenn Galindo and Walter Reed, brought to you by Minga House Foundation. If you're looking for a fun and unique experience to have while teaching English here in Colombia, we have hundreds of opportunities for you. So follow us on social media and send us a DM to get started today. Here's a word from our teachers.
Hi, my name's Carly. I've been a volunteer at Colegio Memphis for 2.5 months now. The time has flown by. I can't believe it's almost over. As a volunteer at Colegio Memphis, you are given a lot of trust and freedom to create your own lesson plans and to use the teaching style that you like best. I have chosen to use a lot of art and music, and the kids have really thrived with those methods.
I'm so happy, oh so happy, sing with me. I had fun today. I had fun today.
My favorite part has definitely been the bond you make with these kids. They are so sweet. They always want to hug you and write you sweet notes, and I am just going to miss them so much. I would recommend this program to anybody. You will definitely be a better teacher after it. Thank you so much, Colegio Memphis and Minga House, for this amazing opportunity that I will never forget.
And now, back to our regularly scheduled program at the Travel with a Purpose podcast. We hope to hear from you soon. Don't forget to follow us on social media.
And so they called me up and said, hey, we heard you're a teacher or something. You speak English. You want to teach? And we got acquainted, but I said, no, I'm busy. I'm trying to figure out how to make my nonprofit sustain itself. But again, I had 20 years of working in higher ed with education programs, and I taught high school for a bit. And so it was awesome to hear, wow, I get a call from Colombia Bilingüe. I'm over here working in primarily health projects, which that was not my background. But now education is calling me. So on that Wednesday evening, she called me up and said, "Hey, you want to do this?" Man, I can't. But listen, keep my number. I'm busy. And then Thursday night, I get another call, and she said, "Hey, Glenn, yesterday we talked and I learned more about you. And guess what? We need a state coordinator." Well, by then, I'd figured that I needed 5 million pesos to carry my 3 minimum wage employees and pay the rent of the foundation in a stretch that we didn't have revenue. And I'd run out of savings. I bought a bunch of beds and furniture and it was out. So, and I said, "Well, what does a coordinator job pay?" And she said, 3 million. I said, like, I can't. But man, I was so flattered. I was so excited that I told her, "Well, God, get a hold of me later. I'd love to work with you in education in Colombia Bilingüe, but I can't." And then Friday night, I get the call, and she said, "Glenn, guess what? We need a national coordinator." And I said, "What does that pay?" And she said, 5 million. I said, "Man, all right." I told my staff, they could see how excited I was just to be involved in something called Colombia Bilingüe. And they said, "Well, hold on the fort, go for it." I said, "Yeah, with this, I can pay your salary." So there were no more planes. It was 9 p.m. and on a Friday night. So I caught the last bus. I took the bus overnight to Bogota, and in the morning, they gave me the mic and I started running orientation. So we had 467 teachers in those communities. It ran for 1 semester. And that's what got me into the space of education in Colombia. When the semester was over, half the teachers had to go back home. But the other half, man, again, same thing. They fall in love with Colombia. So they started knocking at doors trying to get hired in all these private schools. They couldn't get hired in public schools without a government program, but that ended. And so I started getting these calls from private schools. "Hey, I got this teacher here who wants to work with me, but I don't know how to hire him. I don't know anything about the visa." And they said, "You were running it. How do we do this?" So unplanned, once again, it just sort of happened. I said, "Well, I guess this is meant to be. Okay, we're going to do some staffing and we'll help you find more teachers." So today we've got about 212 schools that call us in Colombia for English teachers, not just to teach English, but of all fields. And so we named that Teach Colombia. We had going to Volunteer Colombia already. We added Teach Colombia. And that evolved as we began working with state governments and city governments, doing English immersion programs. Tell the Colombian teachers that if they ever wanted to bring their English level beyond what back then was required to graduate as a language teacher, which was only B1, now it is B2. I would tell them you have to go abroad, go to Australia, to go to Canada, go somewhere, go to the US. And they would say, "Great, tell us how." And I would got a couple of companies to do webinars for these teachers. I'd have like 200 of the state of Quindío. I'd have a couple hundred teachers in an audience. And I get a company that take teachers to the US to do a webinar. There, that's how you do it. Okay. But then after the webinar, we did it twice. The companies would say, "Glenn, I need all those teachers." So it was clear that there was a demand. And so when the pandemic came, we couldn't bring volunteers. We couldn't bring teachers. I sold my house and we decided, well, that must be the next big thing. Let's focus on developing that knowledge and pipeline. And so in 2022, we had our first group. We sent 67 teachers to the US. It was tons of fun because these families really, really wanted to go. And to be part of a family's dream come true was addicting. It was a lot of fun to be part of that solution. They were ever grateful and appreciative and happy. And so we said, okay, this is it. And it paid more than the Colombian schools pay us to find them teachers. And our database now was bigger. And so our team we went hard on it. And so we've got about 720 teachers now in the US. And we see that as will continue to grow. And so that's basically our biggest revenue source now, from which we fund the projects that we're involved in. And we call that Teach USA. So we had Volunteer Colombia, Teach Colombia, Teach USA. Along the way, we began working with credit-based volunteering, like field courses in graduate programs and teacher training in health, global health, courses, some cultural courses like conflict and violence in Medellin or Afro-Colombian culture in Cartagena. We grew our partnerships and access to university credit courses. So we call that Learn Colombia. Along the way, we adopted a school here locally. Our community of about 65,000 did not have a bilingual school, so we thought let's make one. So that's been our biggest project now for the last 3 years in developing a school. We're very proud. To us, it's a lot of money, but out of money generated from staffing, we've invested about $300,000 in standing up that school, from infrastructure to salaries to technology to just upkeep and paying some of their debt because they were going out of business. We were able, legal and accounting, we were able to turn it into a nonprofit and carry the legacy of 23 years that they'd been operating. So now it's a 26-year-old nonprofit foundation school. K through next year we'll have grade 11. We're going to add grade 12, which will be all preparation for studying abroad, test prep, improvement, language acquisition, perhaps some study abroad applications, an application period for scholarships and so on. And we recently became approved for veterans administrations in the U.S., veterans administrations, educational program funding like GI Bill or VOCAV, rehab dollars, which they're able through our affiliation with Westminster University in Utah. Veterans will be able to June 2026. We already have Spanish courses, but now they'll be able to use their federal funding, veteran benefit, education benefits to pay for those. And so we should have an increased participation of veterans. We launched troops to teachers. So we're going to specifically help and orient and target identifying veterans who want to transition their instructional experience, because everybody turns into an instructor in the military. And there's a lot of disabled and retired veterans. There's about 1,000 in Colombia alone, about 3,000 in Panama, that we hope that we can provide an answer, because there really wasn't a whole lot that they could do in Colombia. But we got that solved, and so hopefully we'll have a lot of participation. Last year, we also began, now that we have a school, we began hosting, facilitating whole families to come and do volunteering with their kids. So their kids are enrolled in the school. They're doing Spanish immersion. The parents are doing volunteer work. That is called world schooling or family gap year. And that'll cross with military families or non-military families. So we're creating this ecosystem that deals with our motto, which is travel with a purpose. I believe that you have to, well, I didn't make this up. You need a light post, you need a guide. Otherwise, you just run around in circles. And especially in volunteering, it's important to really understand why you're doing it, so that to prevent disappointment, to prevent aimless failure. There's got to be a purpose. There's got to be a reason why you're doing it. And if you're clear about that, then it's almost extremely difficult or impossible to have a negative experience, because you're focused on that outcome that you're pursuing or that experience that you want to have. But now that we have put together, originally, as I said at the beginning, it wasn't this big master plan. I just thought it would be fun to hang out in Colombia, because 6-7 years earlier, I had a great time. Sure, let's do it again. But it's evolved, because now 13 years later, I'm with my partner, my bride, my spouse of Ana Maria, of 9 years together, and but we're gonna have our fourth child probably next week. So life's been good. I've always had something to solve, something to develop, and they let you down here. If you're just willing to try, and you can say, oh gosh, things are more bureaucratic. Yeah. They actually let you. If you persist, if you persevere, you're gonna get it done. And I'm still in love, as if it's day one of. Right now I would say my spouse, yes, but day one she wasn't around, and so what got me, for me, it was the coffee region. What got me was the landscape. What got me was the climate. What got me was the culture. I traveled to Bogota and I traveled to Medellin before, but I found a home for me, especially in what we do. And we work nationally, and we also operate in Costa Rica and in the U.S., But as far as the volunteering, the heart of the foundation, it's a community of about 65,000. We know all the leaders, we know all the neighborhoods, we know all the players in the community, and we can make things happen. It's safe, it's inexpensive, love the views, love the weather. We're having a good time. We're still on projects, and I just don't see it ending anytime soon. Come and visit. There's the story.
Some of the things that I kind of took away from what you're talking about, I think that both Colombia and the United States, especially the United States recently, have been through a tumultuous history. Both countries have had taken some hard hits, most definitely, whether it's present or in the past, as far as stereotypes and safety and security and all these different things. But hearing about how Minga House Foundation is creating solutions, right? And one of the things that really attracted me to Colombia, for example, was the fact to break stereotypes. I've always been that type of person. When I was interested in studying abroad in college, a lot of people would go to Spain. I didn't want that. And so I went to Nicaragua first. I felt safe. It was a great time. I got to know a lot of people, and I was able to kind of break down some of those barriers, stereotypes, things like that. I consider myself a continuous learner. That is definitely one of the reasons that I got into education, is to continuously learn about things. And then that kind of led me to Peru, and then now Colombia. So hearing about this transformative property that Minga House has, right? It's very inspiring to hear that, most definitely, about you guys.